What hobby would you like to give a try but don't because of the expense? Flying without a doubt. Would want to get a pilot's license. You should at least take a discovery flight. They're usually only $100 or so. It's a lot like a drug dealer giving you your first taste for free. I did it once. 2,000 hours of flying later I finally gave up the habit. 3D printing. If I get a cheap printer, I know I'll just end up jonesing for a more expensive printer. And pretty soon I'll be convincing my wife to let me buy $50,000 worth of plastic so I can print a new shed to house my collection of printers. Edit. Please stop suggesting cheap printers. I told you how this would end. Edit. For those asking, the movie is not currently in development. Keep an eye on R. Rome Sweet Rome or R. Proofrock 451 for any updates. Sailing looks fun. One I can help on. Don't buy a boat. Look into sailing centers in your area. You can get lessons, rent the boats, and even get into racing. In my area, Boston, there's many of these places. You can go as small as a one-person boat on the river or as large as a 6 to 7-person boat out of the harbor and into the ocean. Relative to owning a boat, memberships are extremely affordable. Best part is that if you decide you don't love it, you're not $50K or more in the hole. Stained glass, collecting rare books, collecting art, collecting old maps. Start my own private aerospace company like all the cool billionaires, but without all the pain of running a business and finding customers. Playing the harp. I wanted to learn so badly ever since there was a small segment on a kids' TV show when I was little. Maybe Teletubbies? I was upset for years that my parents said no until I looked into it myself much later and saw that harps easily cost £1,000 plus. I think it's fair they didn't want to hand that kind of money over to a 6-7-year-old who would probably have broken it or got bored after a few months. 22 now and still biding my time for financial security to finally give it a shot. Probably with a rental rather than buying. I knew a woman once who played harp. She told me that it's not uncommon for multiple siblings to be able to play it. That's how families justify the expense of the instrument and also sometimes having to travel a long distance for lessons. In addition to the expense, the harp kind of takes over your life in other ways. She told me that when she was looking for her first car, they brought the harp along to make sure it would fit and come in and out without too much trouble. One upside is that she got lots of gigs playing atmospheric music at wedding receptions and fancy corporate parties. She said guests usually weren't paying attention, so she just got paid like $100 per hour to practice her scales. Cosplay. When I see the work in detail that goes into some of the people at cons I have been to, I admire the crap out of them, but I know I would have neither the time, patience or dedication it would take to create some of the things I have seen. My girlfriend and I made 18 different costumes in 2018. It can be extremely expensive, but depending on your character, your coupons, and your crafting ability, you can do a lot of great costumes on a budget. If you ever want to give it a try, get the Joann's Fabric app for coupons, and hunt through Goodwill like your life depends on it. A cosplay doesn't have to be made from scratch. Some of my best were made by taking existing garments and just altering them as you're right that it does take a lot of time though. I suggest picking an easy character you can do well, and work on it here and there when you've got time. By the next con, you'll be good to go. Building a gigantic Lego city. I'd love to have a saltwater aquarium. The fish and coral are just beautiful. It's not so much the upfront cost that keeps me from doing it as the ongoing and optional ones. I was in a place that sold exclusively saltwater fish and fell in love with a little stingray. That stingray cost $2,000. Maybe someday, when I can trust my impulse control a bit more. Starting with a FOWLR. Fish only with live rock. Tank is a great dip into the saltwater world. Plus you can always add beginner coral frags and watch it all grow. Clownfish are incredibly personable and interesting. If you take advantage of Petco's dollar per gallon sales, you can be up and running for around $200. Upkeep isn't that bad, but it has to be consistent. I've pretty much learned everything about keeping saltwater from Reddit. You can always start somewhere and get into it. Don't let saltwater scare you. Skydiving, flying, prospecting. I'd love so much to be able to buy a couple of claims on the side of a mountain and spend the next few years picking at it and pulling gemstones out. Thar's gold in them Thar hills. Okay, Mr. Pocket, I'm a-coming. I've always wanted to play golf. Like a full 18 holes on a proper course, but with the fees and the membership needed, and then also the full set of clubs etc. It is way too expensive. Therefore I tend to settle for the driving range every few weeks or so. There are lots of clubs that have reasonable rates for a one-day usage. And many resorts you can stay at that have golf clubs attached. You can rent a set of clubs and have at it. It helps to bring someone who knows what they're doing. But if you call in advance, you might be able to get an instructor or at least guidance before you go. Dressage. I just want to prance on a fancy pony, damn it. My mother rides dressage. Board for the hours alone is about the same as my mortgage. Not to mention tech lessons, vet bills, farrier, entry fees into shows, cost of a trailer and maintenance. Yeah, it's an expensive hobby. Virtual reality. If you don't have the computer for it, pretty soon Oculus will be releasing the Quest, which doesn't require a computer or all of the sensors, but will still allow for moving around, controller tracking, and for all 3 degrees of rotation and translation. It's supposed to be available for $399, I believe. Long-range target shooting. Shooting tin cans is fun, but I think it would be super satisfying to turn it into an art form and be able to hit a target 1,000 yards away. The guns are expensive. The scopes are just as much as the guns. The ammo is expensive. This isn't sustainable on an hourly income. Scale your targets. While I have setups that have gone to a mile, and cannot argue that it's not extremely gratifying to hit that far. A .22 out to 200-300 yards trying to hit a golf ball-sized target is extremely challenging. A dependable, accurate .22 bolt action and entry-level scope combo could be put together for $500-ish. And .22 is the most affordable round to shoot at roughly 5C per round. Edit. Many of our definitions of precision seem to vary. But that's okay. Have fun and be safe. Either learning to play guitar or archery, including various styles. Edit. Thank you all for the comments and advice. Guitar isn't super expensive to get started in. You can start on a nylon string guitar, which can usually be found on Craigslist for $50. Ring a friend who knows a little about guitars to make sure it's playable. You can learn how to read chord charts and tabs either online or from a book. Then, spend time finding a good YouTube series to get the basics down. A guitar teacher will speed this along and help you avoid pitfalls, but adds to the price. Of course, you'll then also want a nicer guitar, which will be $250 minus $500. And, if you stick with it, you'll realize how nice the $1,000 and up guitars play. So it can be a slippery slope. Archery isn't too expensive to get started in. And if you have a field to practice in, you can reuse arrows and targets a really long time for very little cost. Outdoor rock climbing. I climb indoors, but the gear and travel to do neat things outside is intimidating. I have always wanted to play the drums. You can get a decent set for less than $500, which is a crazy cheap startup price for a new instrument. It should also hold its value long enough to see if it's something you want to stick to. Otherwise, just return it or sell it. If you do stick with it though, you will sink thousands in upgrades and additions over the years. I've been playing for over a decade and still don't have the setup that I want. The biggest downside to the drums: they're such a pain to transport. Greater than the biggest downside to the drums: they're such a pain to transport. The biggest downside to drums is that they annoy everyone around you even when you are good at it. At least most instruments. Once you get good, people will listen to you play songs. But drums are loud. Vinyl collecting or comic book collecting. I love collecting vinyl, but I'm also on a very tight budget. Part of the fun is hunting garage sales or thrift stores for stuff I like for cheap. The mint condition records you buy for $1 at a garage sale will always sound sweeter because of how you got them. FPV drone racing. Taking classes. There's so many classes I want to take through my local arts center and community colleges. Ideally, I'd like to go back to school and get more but I don't have the time or money. I just really miss school and I like learning. Painting. The canvases cost so much, and so does the paint. Sad face. Not necessarily. Painting in acrylic can be real cheap. Instead of canvas you can paint on wood panels. And you only need a few basic colors to get started. Also, Craftsmart brushes are decent, especially for how inexpensive they are. I've never painted in oils, but watercolor can also be cheap. Also, you can go to thrift stores and buy canvases that other people have painted on, have ugly prints on them. You could try to remove the old paint. But I just paint over what was there before and haven't had an issue yet. A friend of a friend would buy those generic-looking landscape paintings from thrift stores and just paint extra things into them like weird creatures or robots. And it was way cooler than it probably sounds. Consider watercolor. Instead of canvases, it almost exclusively uses paper, which has a wide range of prices, many of which are definitely affordable. And the paints, while an investment, if it's artist grade, do last a long time. Hit me up if you want more information, links, or advice. Train modeling. A good friend once said to me, "You want to know how to tell if a man is successful? Look at his basement. If he has trains down there, the man is *C king successful." Quote. Do Lego trains count? Calligraphy. All the special pens, classes, and then if I really want to do something with it, I'd probably buy one of those fancy schmancy iPad and pen thingies. So yeah, that adds up. Glass blowing. And blacksmithing. *edit*, by the way. The username is in reference to the first time I juggled torches. But yes, it's very relevant to this comment as well. I'd love to learn to fly, but it's ridiculously expensive. And I already have an expensive hobby. Motorcycles. Autocross. I mean, you can a decent cheap car, but safety equipment, brakes, track fees, trailer, gas, etc. get expensive quick. Painting. But unfortunately, money isn't the only issue when you're depressed. Photography. Space travel. A bit above my pay grade. Edit. 600 plus comments and nobody said it before. Maybe I am different. Indie filmmaking. We're at a point now where anyone can be a filmmaker. If you have a cell phone, you can make a movie. A good example is the low-budget horror movie, Jennifer Help Us, which was filmed entirely on iPhones. You also don't need an expensive editing program either, as programs like Hit Film Express are free and fantastic. Even if you can't wrangle a ton of people, you can still make something spectacular, whether it's with some friends or by yourself. As someone who is trying to get into my local film scene and get my big break in the underground horror community, it can be tough, but not impossible. I highly recommend looking into the videos Darius Britt makes, since he's an indie filmmaker who has won awards for his work and gives informative advice on everything from editing, directing, lighting, and other relating stuff. Traveling. I joined a competitive skiing association a few years back. Slalom, giant slalom, moguls and downhill. The traveling for competitions. The expense of the 4 different types of skis for those types of racing combined with me having a full-time career made it difficult. I only did it 1 season. Now I just ski for fun. Deep water welding. That's not something I would have considered to be a hobby. More a profession. Does seem very interesting though. Welding in general can be pretty fun. I don't know about deep water welding, but every once in a while I'd break out my little MMA box and weld random things together. Deep water welding is an incredibly lucrative profession, not at all a hobby. I've also heard it can be incredibly dangerous, taking questionable Chinese pharmaceutical chemicals to greatly enhance my performance in the monsieur. Get a legit testosterone RX to start. Trend turns you into a literal god. You ever see that movie Unbreakable where Bruce Willis just keeps benching more and more weight, discovering his true strength? Yay. Turns out he wasn't a superhero at all and was just blasting a gram of tren a week. Thank you so much for watching and have a good day.